The Friday evening lineup at Millway Price Right moved the way Friday lineups always did. Too slowly, with too many people who had somewhere better to be. Archer Devlin stood near the back of lane 4 with a basket of groceries, and his 9-year-old daughter Fern pressed against his side, studying the ceiling lights with the focused attention she gave to things most adults had long stopped noticing. He almost missed it. The cashier in lane 3, a woman somewhere in her mid-30s with dark hair pinned back and an ill-fitting store vest, was processing a return when the man in the gray blazer appeared from the direction of the service desk. He moved through the store the way certain men move through rooms they believed belonged to them, without adjustment, without acknowledgement, leaving small silences in his wake. Royce Pemberton. Archer recognized the name from the district manager placard near the entrance, though he had never dealt with the man directly. He serviced the HVAC units at 2 Price Right locations and communicated only with the maintenance coordinator by phone. Royce stopped behind the cashier and leaned close enough that she visibly stiffened. His voice carried without effort. "How many times do I need to explain the return protocol before you stop costing this store money?" A few people in the lane looked up. The cashier said something quiet, an explanation probably, and Royce cut her off with a sound somewhere between a laugh and a dismissal. "I don't want an explanation. I want the number corrected, and I want to know why I'm still standing here having this conversation." Fern stopped watching the ceiling. The cashier typed something into the register. Her hands were steady in a way that struck Archer as strange. Not the steadiness of someone used to being spoken to that way. Different, controlled. Like someone choosing to keep still rather than someone who had learned to stop reacting. Royce grabbed the printed receipt from the register tray before she could process it and held it up for the nearest customers to see. "This is wrong. Again. Do you understand what that means for your quarterly review?" "Sir," the cashier began. "Don't." He dropped the receipt on the counter instead of handing it back. "Fix it, and when you're done, see me in the back office." He turned to leave, and Archer watched the cashier reach for the receipt, flatten it carefully, begin the correction. And then Royce turned back, stepped close again, and said loudly enough that Archer heard it clearly from 6 meters away. "People who can't manage a basic return have no business working a register. I don't know why HR keeps sending me people like you." The lane went quiet. Fern's hand found Archer's sleeve. He set the basket down. He had spent 8 years driving supply routes for a freight company before a highway accident took his wife and took the use of his left knee with the same winter, leaving him rebuilding everything. His livelihood, his purpose, the shape of a day, from the ground up. He was not a man who led with confrontation, but he was a man who recognized the particular cruelty of someone who chose their audience carefully, who understood that a store full of strangers was better than an empty hallway because witnesses confirmed power rather than checked it. He walked to lane 3. "Hey." Royce turned. His expression cycled through surprise to assessment to dismissal in 2 seconds. He looked at Archer the way men like him looked at anyone wearing a work jacket on a Friday evening, as context, not competition. "That's enough," Archer said. Royce blinked. "Excuse me." "You've been standing there for 4 minutes making sure everyone in this store hears you. That's enough." The cashier had stopped typing. Royce adjusted the lapel of his blazer with a single precise motion. "This is a personnel matter. I'd suggest you mind your own business before you create a problem for yourself." "The problem's already here," Archer said. "I just walked over to it." Someone near the pharmacy section laughed nervously. A teenage boy at lane 2 had his phone halfway out of his pocket. Royce's expression went flat in a way that had nothing to do with composure. "Do you know who I am?" "District manager," Archer said. "I've got 2 service contracts with your maintenance department, so yeah, I have some idea." Something shifted in Royce's face, not recognition exactly, but proximity to it. "Then you understand why you should step back right now." "I understand you've got a job that makes you comfortable speaking to people that way," Archer said. "I'm telling you to stop." Royce looked from Archer to the cashier to the lane full of people watching, with the cautious attention of bystanders calculating their own risk. Then he smiled. It was a small, practiced smile, the kind developed specifically for moments like this one, for recording in someone else's memory as calm reason against unreasonable provocation. "Sir," he said to Archer, "I'm going to have to ask you to return to your lane, otherwise I'll need to involve store security, and that tends to become inconvenient for everyone." He glanced at Fern without quite looking at her, especially when children are present. Archer held eye contact. "Go ahead." Roy studied him for one more second, then turned and walked toward the back of the store without hurrying. The cashier let out a slow, careful breath. She looked at Archer in a way that lasted slightly too long. Not gratitude exactly, but something more precise. Measuring, almost. Like she was cataloging him. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "Neither did he," Archer answered. Fern appeared at his elbow and placed a box of crackers on the conveyor belt with decisive seriousness. "Can we still get the cereal?" The cashier glanced down at Fern and smiled, genuine brief, the first real expression she had shown in several minutes. "Which kind?" "The one with the bear. Aisle 6, middle shelf." Fern looked up at her father as if this constituted a plan. Archer reached for his basket. Up close, he noticed the cashier's name tag read Debbie. He also noticed her hands as she processed the transaction. No calluses on the knuckle joints, nails cut neatly short but not ragged. He had spent years working with his hands and knew what hands looked like that had done the same. Hers had not worked a register long. He tucked the observation somewhere without examining it. His phone buzzed while he waited for Fern in aisle 6. A message from the Price Right maintenance coordinator, not a call, just text, which was how bad news arrived when someone wanted a paper trail and no conversation. Service agreement review initiated, pending authorization from district management. Archer read it twice, then looked up at Fern pulling 2 cereal boxes from the shelf to compare them. He already knew what the review would find. By 7 in the morning, his phone had 3 voicemails and 2 text messages. Greenfield Meats canceled his quarterly filter service. The school board facility coordinator, a soft-spoken man who had been a reliable account for 3 years, called to say there had been a complaint filed about Archer's conduct and they were pausing work orders pending review. The Price Right coordinator confirmed both locations were suspending contracts effective immediately. Fern was still asleep when the 3rd cancellation arrived. Archer stood at the kitchen window with coffee going cold in his hand, watching the birch trees at the back of the property shiver in the early April wind, and calculated what he had left. Enough for 2 months, maybe 3 if he was careful, and nothing in the house broke. He heard her on the stairs before she appeared. She had worn through the carpet on the 4th step, and he kept forgetting to fix it. She stood in the kitchen doorway in her hockey socks and yesterday's sweater, reading his face the way she had learned to read it the year after her mother died, when expressions became her primary language for understanding what was about to change. "Is it bad?" she asked. "It's manageable," he said. She sat down at the table, pulled the cereal toward her, the one with the bear which she had chosen last night with the kind of conviction she brought to things she sensed she needed to claim. "That means it's not good." He sat across from her. Some contracts got paused. "Because of last night." He nodded once. Fern poured cereal into her bowl and was quiet for a moment. "Did you do the wrong thing?" Archer looked at his daughter. She was 9 and asked questions like that without irony, as though the answer might actually change something. He had spent 8 months after the accident wondering the same thing about the wrong road, the wrong weather, the wrong timing, and had eventually decided that some questions were the wrong shape for the facts they were trying to hold. "No," he said. Fern nodded as if filing it. "Okay." She ate cereal. He finished the cold coffee. Neither of them mentioned it again. The gate at his first job site was chained shut with a notice zip-tied to the fence. Contract terminated. No date, no signature. Archer photographed it, unfolded the page, smoothed the crease with his thumb, and was still standing there when a car pulled in behind his truck. Silver, Ontario plates. A woman stepped out wearing dark jeans, a plain gray jacket, and no lanyard, which was the first thing he noticed, because every government field worker he had ever met wore a lanyard before they wore anything else. She was the cashier from Lane 3. Without the vest and the bad lighting, she looked like someone who spent her time in rooms where decisions were made. The posture was the same, but the context had shifted, the way a word changes meaning depending on which sentence holds it. Archer folded the termination notice. "You followed me. Your company name is on your truck," she said, "and you had 2 Price Right contracts. I had a reasonable idea where you'd be this morning." So he put the paper in his pocket. "More apologies?" "No." She looked at the chained gate, then back at him. "Information." He crossed his arms. "I've had a full morning of that already." "Royce Pemberton doesn't stop at retaliation," she said. "He escalates until people either leave his area or become examples." She said it evenly, without drama, the way someone recited facts they had spent time confirming. "He has 11 documented complaints filed with 3 separate oversight bodies in the last 4 years. all of them quietly withdrawn after the complainants experienced professional consequences. Archer stared at her. How would a grocery store cashier know that? She met his gaze steadily. Because I'm not a cashier. He waited. My name is Delia Frost. I'm the Regional Director of Employment Standards for the Ontario Ministry of Labour, Immigration, Training and Skills Development. She said it without inflection, the way people stated their names, not their accomplishments. I've been conducting a compliance observation at that location for 3 weeks. Royce has been flagged for a pattern of workplace harassment, wage manipulation, and retaliatory scheduling against employees who file internal complaints. The silence between them held for a moment. Archer looked at the chained gate, then at the termination notice in his pocket, then at the woman standing in the gravel lot of his first canceled job, and said the only thing that made sense. He had no idea. That I was there? No. That he picked last night to do it. Delia Frost was quiet for a moment. He picks every night to do it. He just picked the wrong one. A vehicle turned into the lot before Archer could answer. A black company SUV moving with the deliberate pace of something that wanted to be seen arriving. Royce Pemberton stepped out wearing a jacket with the corporate logo. He looked less like a district manager now than like someone who had spent the drive over deciding how much of his position he was willing to spend in one place. He looked first at Delia, then at Archer. A slow calculation crossed his face. Well, he said, I should have guessed. He walked forward. You're not supposed to be here, Miss Frost. Your audit window closed last week. It was extended, she said, as of this morning. Royce's jaw tightened. He turned to Archer with the expression of someone recalibrating from a position they had assumed was secure. Do you have any idea what you've stepped into? I stepped into a grocery store, Archer said. You stepped in after me. Royce pulled out his phone. I'm calling legal. Go ahead, Delia said. Have them pull the internal complaint files from the last 4 years while they're at it. The Regional Compliance Office has copies. Royce dialed anyway, turned slightly away, voice low and clipped. Archer caught fragments: contractor liability, media relations, board advisory, the kind of language designed to sound like action while the real action was happening somewhere else. When he turned back, his expression had reset into something that looked like patience but wasn't. Mr. Devlin, he said, you're a working man. You've got contracts overhead, a kid to take care of. He said it the way people said I know where you live, as information, not conversation. This isn't your fight. There's no version of this where standing here helps you. Fern had said almost the same thing at breakfast, but with different punctuation. You used my daughter, Archer said quietly. Royce frowned. What? Last night in the store, this morning on the phone to whoever that was. He kept his voice level. She's 9 years old. She's not part of whatever this is. Something flickered across Royce's face. Not guilt, it was too practiced for that, recalibration. Delia stepped forward. Her voice changed, not louder but denser, the way certain materials are heavier than they appear. Mr. Pemberton, referencing a minor in the context of a professional dispute to imply leverage constitutes intimidation under Section 423 of the Criminal Code. I'd recommend you end this conversation and contact counsel before proceeding further. Royce looked at her for a long moment. Then he left. The sound of the SUV pulling out of the lot was surprisingly ordinary. Archer exhaled through his nose. Could you actually charge him with that? Delia turned to face him. That depends on what happens next. A pause. There's a labor tribunal hearing scheduled for Thursday. The ministry's case against Royce Pemberton. 6 current employees are on record. She looked at Archer. Your statement about Friday night would be a 7th. I'm not an employee. No, you're a contractor who witnessed conduct that directly mirrors the documented pattern, and you're someone he retaliated against within 12 hours, which is its own evidentiary thread. Archer thought about the phone calls that morning, the termination notices, Fern reading his face across the breakfast table. If I go in there, he said, I say what I saw, nothing more. That's all I'm asking. He looked at the chained gate one more time. Then he got in his truck. By Thursday, the local CBC affiliate had run 2 segments. One framed Archer as a confrontational bystander. The other aired 2 days later after someone sent the station the store's own security footage and ran with a different headline. Royce's communications team issued a statement about employee support and ongoing review processes, the kind of statement that used many words to say nothing, and several of those words twice. Archer wore the same jacket he'd worn to Fern's school concert in February. It pulled at the shoulders, but it was clean. The tribunal hearing was held at a government office building in the regional center. Long tables, fluorescent lighting, water pitchers nobody touched. 12 people present. Ministry legal counsel, Price-Wright corporate lawyers, 2 union representatives, the hearing officer, and 6 employees who sat on the left side of the room with the particular stillness of people who had agreed to be there but had not yet decided whether that had been the right decision. Royce Pemberton sat across from them in a suit that cost more than Archer's truck payment, with 2 lawyers and the expression of a man waiting for a process to confirm what he already knew about its outcome. Archer sat near the back until the hearing officer called his name. He walked to the front and placed his hands flat on the table. No notes. He had learned long ago that notes made people look at paper instead of faces, and faces were where truth either landed or didn't. The ministry lawyer asked him to describe what he had observed on Friday evening. He described it, plainly. The words Royce had used. The way the cashier's shoulders had gone rigid before she allowed herself to respond. The receipt dropped on the counter instead of handed back. The comment about HR sending the wrong kind of people. Corporate counsel interrupted twice. Both times the hearing officer waved the interruptions off. When Archer finished, the hearing officer asked whether he had anything to add. He looked at the 6 employees on the left side of the room. A woman about his age who kept her hands flat on the table like she was holding something down. A young man who had not looked up since proceedings began. An older man with a name tag still clipped to his jacket from his morning shift, as though he had not had time to change, or had wanted to show that he had come directly from work to this room. I don't know any of these people, Archer said. I don't know their situations. I know one night at one store, and I know what I heard. He paused. But I've been a working person my whole life. I know what it costs to show up for a job when the job is hard, and I know what it looks like when someone uses authority to make that harder on purpose. The room held the words longer than rooms usually hold things. Then Price-Wright's lead counsel said, "Mr. Devlin, are you aware that your previous service contracts with our locations were under review for compliance issues prior to Friday's incident?" Archer looked at him. No, because there weren't any. "Our records indicate." "Your records were created Saturday morning," Delia Frost said from her seat beside the ministry lawyer. She placed a document on the table. Time spent on file creation is 9:14 a.m., April 12th. The incident occurred Friday evening. She slid 2 more pages forward. These are the actual inspection records from both locations. Current, signed, unaltered. Corporate counsel reached for the pages. His expression did not change, but his posture did. Delia pressed a key on the laptop beside her. Audio filled the room, clear, close, unambiguous. Royce's voice from the store floor, every word from Friday night in sequence, including the line about HR and the wrong kind of people, including the oblique reference to Fern that Archer had not even known was recorded until this moment. Nobody moved while it played. When it stopped, Royce Pemberton looked at the laptop as though understanding for the first time that the witness he had dismissed had been running a ministry-grade recorder in her vest pocket and had never once appeared to be anything other than someone trying to correct a receipt. The hearing officer turned to Royce directly. "Is this recording consistent with your conduct on Friday evening?" Royce's counsel leaned close. They conferred for 11 seconds. Archer counted. Royce said, "I'd like to make a statement." The hearing officer nodded. What followed was 9 minutes of executive language. Context, operational pressures, misunderstandings, regrettable tone. It was fluent and detailed and had the texture of something rehearsed without being memorable. Delia waited until he finished. Then she placed one final document on the table. It was a provincial health support benefits summary dated 4 years earlier. In the margin, highlighted in yellow, was a note about the employer lobbying group that had successfully argued for a cap on claim duration, a cap that had cut short coverage for workers on extended medical leave. Archer looked at the document. His wife had been on extended medical leave. Her coverage had run out in October of the year she died, and he had never understood the administrative reason, had simply filed it alongside the other things that had happened and not happened and could not be changed. The lobby group's signatory was Royce Pemberton, then regional director of a retail industry association. The room was very quiet. Archer looked at the document for a long time. Then he looked at Royce, who had gone entirely still, and understood that this was not actually about one night at a grocery store. It had not been from the beginning. It was about a man who had spent years building systems that made other people smaller, and who had done it so efficiently and so repeatedly that he had simply never been in a room where those systems were shown back to him all at once. Archer did not say anything else. He didn't need to. The room had already changed. The hearing officer issued a preliminary suspension of Royce Pemberton's authority pending a full evidentiary review. The corporate chair, reached by phone that afternoon, accepted the suspension and announced an independent audit of regional operations across all Ontario locations. 3 of the 6 employees on the left side of the room filed expanded complaints before the week was out. The week after, Archer received a call from Price Wright's corporate maintenance office. All suspended contracts reinstated, plus a standing offer for 3 additional locations in the county. He accepted 2. He didn't need 3. On a Tuesday evening in late April, Delia Frost stopped by Millway Price Wright while Archer was finishing a routine inspection of the freezer units at the back of the store. She was not wearing a vest. She carried 2 coffees from the Tim Hortons across the street and handed him one without asking whether he wanted it. They stood by the loading dock in the yellow light falling from the warehouse lamps, and neither of them said much for a while. "The woman who kept her hands flat on the table," Archer said finally. "How is she doing?" "Back on the schedule she was supposed to have before he cut her hours." Delia held her coffee with both hands. "Her son starts at Western in September." Archer nodded. He looked at the loading dock and thought about the morning he had stood at a chained gate with a termination notice in his hand, which felt like a different geography now, though it was 10 minutes away. "You could have handled all of this without me," he said. "Yes. But you came to find me anyway." Delia was quiet for a moment. "You stood up when you had something real to lose. That's not nothing." She looked at him. "And when the corporate lawyer tried to reframe what happened, the hearing room didn't look at me. They looked at you. Because I was the only one in the room without a title. Because you were the only one in the room who wasn't translating," she said. Fern appeared around the corner of the building in her backpack from school, having been dropped off by a neighbor who had collected her from programming club. She spotted Delia immediately with the particular alertness children, reserved for people they had already assessed and filed. "Are you still working at the grocery store?" Fern asked. Delia smiled, the real kind, which Archer recognized now from the one she had given Fern over the cereal question on Friday night. "Not anymore." Fern considered this. "What do you do now?" "I make sure places like this treat people properly." Fern absorbed that the way she absorbed things, without visible reaction, which meant she was filing it somewhere important. She reached into the front pocket of her backpack and produced a granola bar, which she handed to Delia with the solemnity of a small official exchange. "That's a good job," Fern said. Delia held the granola bar and looked at it, and then at the girl who had given it to her, and something in her expression settled into something quieter than anything she had shown in a boardroom or a tribunal or a store aisle at the end of a long shift. Later, driving home with Fern asleep against the passenger window, the April dark coming down soft over the fields between Harrow Falls and the highway, Archer Devlin thought about what Fern had asked him at the breakfast table the week before. "Did you do the wrong thing?" And the answer he had given her, which he had meant but had not been entirely sure he could afford. He was sure now. He turned on the radio low. He did not check his phone. He watched the road ahead and listened to Fern breathe in the even, uncomplicated way of someone who had not yet needed to learn how to carry things quietly, and understood in the particular way that fathers sometimes understand things only after they have cost something real, that this, exactly this, was what he had been standing up for. Not the contract, not his name in a tribunal record. This. And somehow that made all the rest of it exactly the right size.